Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're back to the R300, and sorry there was such a long delay, but honestly, guys, I was baffled. I mean, the power supply issues were fairly easy to resolve, relatively. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You got a rectifier tube, cap, choke, cap, that sort of thing. But this weird square wave and that huge dip that I was seeing after 10K and it rolling off after 8K, I was trying to think what could be causing that. And I played around with the negative feedback, disconnecting it, connecting it, changing it, didn't change it at all. Studied the driver section of this amp, which the guy that I'm working with at Willsenton asked me not to share the schematic, and so I'm honoring his wishes. But you'll have to believe me that it's a very unique way of driving a 300B tube. And especially the way they're biasing the 300B tube using the cathode follower that's direct coupled to the tube is a unique way or a unique solution to this issue. And honestly, it makes sense. You're giving the tube the drive it needs and the current it needs to offset its Miller capacitance, but you're also setting the negative voltage on the grid at the same time without having to introduce another coupling cap, which is a good thing. You don't want to have, multiple coupling caps in the signal path. So anyway, long story short, was studying through all that. The bias points all looked pretty reasonable, and I just couldn't make sense of what that dip was. And so finally I decided to just think outside the box here. Took this little 3.5K 15 watt EdCore output transformer, and as you can see, just direct wired it into the amp. Now, I did have to disconnect the negative feedback on the other channel, so we're using this output transformer and this output transformer in the testing. And so we were comparing apples and apples. I disconnected the global negative feedback in this one because it was going to be too difficult to just breadboard it in just for this simple test. Because what we're trying to determine is this the cause of the roll-off in the weird square wave? And if it is, then we know that there's no point in diving into the rest of the circuit or doing anything to it. There may not need to be anything done to it other than replacing the output transformers. And so that's what we're going to do today. I have no idea what this is going to do, but I'm actually just stumped, guys. If this isn't it, I may have just hit a brick wall as far as trying to make this amp work correctly. So, got this wired up. You can see I got the analog Discovery 2 all connected to it, and we're going to make some THD versus distortion pulls. Hopefully they're going to be very similar, and then if they are, we're going to check the frequency response and look at the square waves and see if this is the solution to this problem. The other thing I wanted to add is I personally would probably use a 5K output transformer. And I know that they normally say to use 3.5K output transformers with a 300B tube. But in my personal build, I used 5K. They make 10 or 15% less power, but they also make less distortion. And you could probably get away with not having any global negative feedback, which just lets the 300B tube sing and lets the whole circuit sing. Anytime you're putting negative feedback in, you're canceling some of the distortion that the amp's creating. And one of the reasons we listen to these triode tube amps like this is we want to hear some distortion. It also would depend on the speakers you're driving. Some speakers, like my RP600Ms, got a kind of nasty dip on the low end down to almost 4 ohms. And if you put a little higher impedance output transformer, it allows you to drive a wider array of speakers with the same output transformer. So anyway, we got all this stuff hooked up. We got the audio analyzer suite with the Analog Discovery 2 hooked up to my old ThinkPad laptop. And let's do some tests on this thing and see if this is, in fact, what's going on with this amp. Okay, like I said, I disconnected the global negative feedback on both channels because it's going to be too difficult to temporarily wire in an external output transformer and hook up the negative feedback and all that mess of wiring, and it might get influenced by the other transformer. Didn't want to have to unsolder every lead inside the amp, and so we have an EdCore 3.5K 15 watt output transformer wired up to the left channel, and the right channel is the factory output transformer with the global negative feedback disconnected. Let's go ahead and make a pull on the control side, which is the right channel, which is the factory output transformer. And we're going to see more distortion than would normally be in this amp because right now we don't have any global negative feedback connected. But it's still not outrageous. 1 watt, we just went past 1%. 2.5 watts, we went by 2%. And we can see the shape of the curve is very similar to the one with the feedback connected. It's just moved up about 2%. So let's see what the EdCore transformer does relative to this one. And we'll switch to the other channel. And it looks like we're seeing basically the same thing. I haven't measured the impedance of the factory transformer, but looking at this graph, I'm going to assume that it probably is a 3.5K one because we're basically getting the exact same reading. And actually, I'm going to put my little jumper in so we can pull both channels at the same time and see what that looks like. And yeah, they look identical. So we're basically getting the same power, same distortion with these two transformers. And I'm going to assume that if I connected the global negative feedback up to this little EdCore transformer, we'd have the same performance we had before. So here's what I'm interested in looking at is how does the frequency response between these two transformers compare? And they look like they're tracking each other fairly closely. But look at the difference there. Right here at this 15K point, it doesn't have the dip, which is the EdCore output transformer. And you can see here at 10K, which is going to be audible to most people, we've got a definite difference in the frequency response. But like I said, from here to there, that's like huge. That's 10 dBs different between the two, which is monstrously different. I do want to go ahead and pull just this channel 2 and see if this little dip we're seeing right here is being caused by some influence by this other output transformer being in the circuit. So I'm going to play just the left channel and put no signal into the right channel and see if that same little dip's there. Yeah, absolutely. You can see that little dip that was there on the other chart isn't there now. And so that factory transformer, that huge dip, was impacting the other channel. And you can see here, like if we call this, like right through here, you can pretty much call that 32 dBs. When you get down here to 40 hertz, which is where most speakers really kind of roll off and there's not a whole lot of music under there, you've got 3/4 of a dB of roll off, which is nothing. It's going to have nice bass response. And then here on the top end, at 10K, you've got a 0.5 dB. At 15K, you've got maybe 3/4 of a dB. And beyond that, there's not really much music up here. I'm not really concerned about that. And I actually like seeing a tube amp roll off like this on the top end. That helps avoid weird oscillations outside of our hearing range. But again, let's pull the other channel, which is the factory output transformer, and see what that looks like again. And then we'll jump up there and do the square waves and take a look at them. And I'm sorry it took so long to get back to this amp, but this problem was so baffling to me, and I was really studying and reading up on the circuit design, trying to think what in the circuit design or the biasing of the tubes or anything that could be causing this frequency response thing. And then I finally just realized that I can't think of anything beyond the output transformers that are doing this. So right here we have basically 33.15 dB across this flat range. When we get down to 40 hertz, we've got a full dB of roll off at 40 hertz. So the little Ed core has got better low frequency response than the factory Willsenton does. But then, like I said, here's 33.15, 10K. You got almost 2 dBs of roll off at 10K, and then it just falls off a cliff. And at 15K, you've got 10 dBs of roll off, or thereabouts, 9 dBs, which is just huge. I mean, that's monstrous. This amp can't have any real top end. Once you get past about 4K, it starts rolling off. And this is 100% the output transformers. You saw the difference between the two. It's just night and day. So let's look at the square waves here. The blue one is the little Ed core, and you can see it's got a pretty flat top on it, and it doesn't have this big ring like the Willsenton one does. And this is more what you want to see. This is telling me this is a really stable output transformer, and it's got a little bit of roll off here, but if you look at this one, it's rolled off way down here before it even gets to that point. So this is a much cleaner square wave out of this little Ed core transformer. Here's the one that I want to see. So what does the 10K square wave look like? Again, this is both channels. The red is the factory output transformer, and the blue one is this little Ed core. And there we go. Now, while this isn't the cleanest 10K square wave I've ever seen, you can see that the ED core is at least trying to reproduce the square wave, and it just rolls off here on the top end. You can see the Willsenton one, it jumps up here and then just nosedives. And that's not even a semblance of a square wave. So again, this isn't what I would call, super, super nice, but you can at least see that this is trying to be square. Where when you look at this one, it's turning the square wave into a little Mount Everest. And so there's the problem, guys. It's the output transformers. And I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they are clearly what's causing these anomalies that I was seeing. And I think the circuit itself is fine. I wonder if a 5K output transformer might be able to get this pulled down a little more, and we might end up with a 5 watt or a 6 watt amplifier instead of this 7 watts at real high distortion. But I think that might be worth giving up some output power to get a cleaner output as far as THD without having to use negative feedback, which that's kind of what a 300B triode amp is known for, is being able to be run with 0 negative feedback. So this looks like a good place to wrap up this video. Well, thank goodness I can stop racking my brain looking at the schematic trying to figure out this issue. It's the transformer. I mean, it's cut and dry. You saw the results. There's something about these output transformers that are in this amp that just aren't playing well with this circuit. I don't know. Again, I may sit down and measure the actual impedance on these. And again, you can't just measure it with an ohm meter. I've got a video on that. I'll link below. About how you have to inject the signal into them and then measure all that kind of stuff. It's not simple to do. Not super complicated. Haven't done it, but I don't know if maybe they put 2.5K output transformers in this thing and that's what's freaking the tube out, or if there's just something about those output transformers that just, I don't know, they're just not made right or something. I don't know. I'm not a transformer manufacturer, but I do know these little cheap ED cores destroy what's in this amp. And these are $75 output transformers that are rated for guitar use. They're not even rated by ED core as being hi-fi output transformers. And so clearly there's something going on here. And hopefully Willsenton's been working on this. They do have a new black or all black R300, and hopefully they watched my other videos, because clearly they do with the comments those guys make on their Facebook page, that they also saw this and went whoops and have changed the output transformers or done something, that's what they're going to have to do to fix this. And for you guys that own these, you're going to have to pony up, put some different output transformers in the amp if you really want it to, do what it's supposed to be doing. I did have a email from the guy who's the U.S. distributor from ISO Tango, and I may contact him and see if maybe they have some potted, transformers that look like these that'll just bolt in, or, with minor mods will bolt in and give us the performance we're looking for out of a 300B amp. And I may talk to the owners of these amps. I got 2 of these things here now that obviously both need some kind of output transformer upgrade, and see what they're interested in doing. So if you're one of the owners of either one of these amps, shoot me an email. I've also got a new email address, Steffi@skunkydesigns.com, so y'all can reach me there, and I'll put that in the description. Anyway, I'm just glad I figured out what's going on with this. And again, I just got to the point that I was just tired of looking at these things. And then it finally just hit me. Maybe it's the output transformer. And luckily that's what it is. And the rest of the circuit design seems to be fine. So anyway, I'm going to do some further work on this. I'm probably going to order a pair of 5K of these little ED cores, because it's not going to hurt for me to have some here for future projects. And I want to compare 3.5K to 5K and see what that does to decide which ones I want to use. And I may try to look for some transformer covers. If any of you know a place that has transformer covers or have seen some on eBay or something like that, please send me an email or put it in the description, and let's try to collectively, work on a solution to this. Because, this little ED core will fit inside that can, or a cover this size will fit over this transformer. So a couple of these, which are $75 a piece, and maybe some covers for probably $200 worth of parts, you can get this thing singing. And then once you fix the power supply and put some good output transformers in it, this should be the equal of probably a $3,000 300B amp from one of the other sources. And again, we could put some ISO Tango or some really nice ones in here, or some Hashimoto's, but they're $500 or $1,000 a piece. So then you're really going up in the world. But for the owner of one of these that he invested in a $1,500 pair of Western Electric 300B tubes, he might be interested in spending that much money on his to get it where it needs to be and to really have a really good sounding 300B amp. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this video. Again, sorry it took a while, but yeah, I just gotten burned out even looking at this thing, trying to figure out what in the world's going on, because I've never seen anything like this, and I've never seen anything on the internet people talking about that, a transformer that didn't even have negative feedback hooked up to it doing crazy stuff like this one was doing. So anyway, if you're enjoying my channel or enjoying this video, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon folks. Thanks to you folks that give me donations to the website. That helps me afford, I'm going to go out and spend $150 on some output transformers just so we can test this and I can show you guys which one of these is the best. Thanks again to the folks that, sent these amps or brought these amps over for me to look at so I can produce this content for you to help us all figure out how to have better sounding systems on a budget. So until the next video, have a nice day.